Hi guys, my name's Dwight Lagore,
And I'm Lynn Lagore.
and we are happy to be able to have a chance just to talk to you like this. We received your questions from Rhonda, and trust that this is a chance to get to know us a little bit better. I'll just read off the questions and then we'll answer them as best we can. The first one is, when and how did you first feel called to missions, and what were your first steps?
So I grew up in Brazil as a missionary kid. My parents first moved to Dallas, Texas to get training. We were there for 2 years and then on to Brazil, where they worked with street children and abandoned children. As a teenager in Brazil at a youth camp, I felt like God had placed a call on my life, and so I decided to return to Canada, get my nurse's training, and my plan was to go back to Brazil to work in the orphanage there.
Yeah, and I also was born I was born in Africa to missionary parents. So I was a missionary kid as well, and grew up in South Africa until I was 16, when my parents sent me to Canada to further my education. I swore I would never become a missionary. Although I went to church once a month to give my tithe, I certainly had no intention to become a missionary. My goal was business and to make lots of money, so that's what I set about to do. Interestingly, I met this amazingly beautiful blonde lady who showed up to church one Sunday, and a couple years later we were married. During a time of grief, only a couple of years after we were married, due to the loss of Lynn's brother, who was only 17, Luke, at the time, our lives were just kind of turned upside down. Our direction in life completely and dramatically changed. We were in Brazil at that time. When we returned to Canada, I promptly quit the job I was working for, and denied another very lucrative position I was offered, and went to Bible college. That was the first, I guess, step. But I think it's important for me to, when I think back, really what changed the trajectory in our lives was after getting married, and I think maybe getting married brings new challenges into life, but was a commitment to seek God and His will for our lives, whatever that meant. And I thought, of course, at that point in time, it would mean that God would direct us into the right business and steps for our lives in that regard, and family. But clearly God had other plans. So that's what happened. After we returned to Canada, like I said, I went to Bible college and I did my commercial pilot training. And Lynn built experience in the hospital as a nurse, a registered nurse in the coronary care unit for a few years. And that was the start. The second question you guys have here is, where have you served and what works have you done? Well, God used a visiting evangelist who visited our church from the fellowship to introduce us to Mozambique. And at that point in time, his story was pretty dramatic about how bad Mozambique was and how it would need people like us in the near future. And immediately Mozambique kind of went into my heart and stuck. And I knew that Mozambique was the place that we were called to be.
But I didn't know that because I was 8 months pregnant at the time, and so the words went in the one ear and out the other. I just thought, there is no way, it didn't touch anything inside of me at all, because I was, of course, as any very pregnant woman is, I was preparing for the arrival of our first child.
We were commissioned by our home church to go and join the missionary work that my parents were doing in South Africa as an initial step toward Mozambique, because Mozambique was still at war. And so we did that and served in a variety of capacities wherever we were needed. I think right from our very beginning, our mission theme was committed to serve. As Jesus said, I didn't even come to be served, but to serve and give my life a ransom for many. It's Mark 10:45, sort of the theme verse of our lives. And so we came to serve, and so we did enrolls in a Bible college as a pastor of a local church, and doing evangelism, as well as starting to do leadership training. So that kind of was our start. But then in 1992, the peace accord was signed, and we were able to move into this very destroyed country with its very broken people. And that is a long, long story of survival and really just making it through each day and not running away. So that's a book that we're probably having to write soon. But so we won't go into that. But in the meantime, we then established what was called SAM Ministries, which is Strategic Action Mission. And if you look it up, samministries.org is our website. We started the mission as a nonprofit entity and registered, and were able to base ourselves on a 2,300 acre farm here in Mozambique. So, yeah.
So one of my jobs, other than bringing up our kids, because I'm a nurse, I was plugged in immediately to the health needs, which were mind-boggling at the time. I had never had to deal with such sick people, and it was basically running an emergency room in the middle of the bush. So that's how our health work started. In time, we opened a clinic, and I trained a guy to work with me. And there was no school nearby, so I ended up teaching kids and women to read, and that was kind of what started our school. And of course, in the school, then you have malnourished kids, so then you start a lunch program. In the clinics, we saw a lot of malnourished babies, so then we had a milk program for those that were underweight or who had lost their kids. So by God's grace, a lot of prayer, and by His help, those programs got launched.
Yeah, and have just developed from that point until today. Mm-hmm. We also started a leadership training program. My heart was to see leaders equipped for the church here in Mozambique. And so that was started, but it was a long process of determining the curriculum that we were going to use and the program we were going to institute. And so we were able to do that, and that leadership training program has grown to include agricultural training, as well as Lynn's worked hard, as well as others on literacy training for women. And so those programs have grown, including empowering the local farmers as well as pastors to better care for their families through things like animal traction, which is cattle and plows and carts, a variety of ways in which appropriate technologies, they call them, to help local people be more productive and better able to provide for themselves and their families as they lead their churches. So that's what we did. Right now we have, I think, more than 1,500, I think it's almost 1,700 leaders enrolled in that program in 4 of the central provinces of the country. So that's pretty amazing. Thankfully, God also sent people to help us. And so we have been able to build a good team of missionaries and local staff who are absolutely key to any of our success. Without good people, and God is still looking for good people, and that's going to be in our prayer request just now. The last question here, or not the last, second last question is, how did COVID-19 affect your ministry? Mm-hmm.
Well, we were flying around the world at the time when COVID was just starting to fly around the world too. We were actually in Brazil on our way back here because we have a sister mission in Brazil. And so we continued on our trip from Brazil to Mozambique. Within a week of arriving here, the borders closed down between here and South Africa, here and everywhere. And so although our plan had been to just be here 6 weeks, go back for conferences and then come back, in, I suppose, April or May. All those got canceled. Everything got canceled, as you probably also remember. And so we were here in lockdown for at least 6 months. Our border was closed, which here is very difficult because this country depends on South Africa and other more developed nations to get a lot of the supplies and services that we need. And it was the first time we'd ever been totally cut off from really outside help at all.
Yeah.
But we're actually fine during that time, and God helps us through. But so that was our beginning.
Yeah.
And then in January following, so this last January, we actually came down with COVID, which was interesting because the borders, I believe, were closed again then too. And in any case, when you come down with COVID, you can't travel. So we're here, but really not much in the way of health services or hospital services. And so Dwight was very sick. Mm-hmm. I was still functional, but sick. And we do have a doctor in town, a Mozambican doctor, who was helping us. And I've got a good medical supply here. So I was able to help Dwight, and of course, with the Lord's help, we made it through and recovered. So that was our start.
Yeah. COVID, obviously, like many ministries, impacted our support base with the loss of quite a few child sponsorship or child sponsors, because that's how we fund our school and our education program, because we try to help the kids go as far as they possibly can in their education, and we do that through child sponsorship. And we also lost support from an organization that gave quite substantially to our feeding program every year. As a result of COVID, they just lost funding and weren't able to do that. But by God's grace, every challenge is an opportunity, and all of you will probably, if you haven't learned that, you will at some point, hopefully. And so as a mission, we launched a new program called Steps to Stop Hunger. And the website is www.stepswithsam.org. And we have been able to generate some enthusiasm, and we've made really good progress toward being able to recover a significant amount of the funding that we lost. So we're very grateful for that to this point. So last question here is, what are your current prayer requests? I'm going to start with a praise report first, and that is that we're just really grateful that Mozambique has come through, it seems, the worst of COVID, and finally, just a couple weeks back, churches were allowed to reopen. They had been completely shut down, and so it really affected our training and our seminar work, but things opened up again, and in the last 2 weekends, we were able to hold 2 celebrations, graduation celebrations for pastors and leaders enrolled in our training program, our Bible and Leadership Training Program. And so we had 5 graduate in a city called Tet week before last, and just yesterday I was able to share in a graduation service just north of us here, a couple hours in a little town called Guru, where another 6 leaders graduated. And it was interesting because there, that's the 5th graduation that we've had in that little community over a period of 20 years. So it's amazing to see what God has done also with those leaders and the churches they've been able to establish and grow through that period of time. So that's been a huge answer to prayer and a huge praise report.
Mm-hmm. You can follow, we are on Facebook, Sam Ministries. I think it's s.a.m.ministries. And our website as well, samministries.org. And we post updates fairly regularly, so you can always follow news items as well as challenges that we're facing on there. And so that's a good source for finding what you can pray for when the Lord lays us on your heart. There are currently 2 children that we're looking after who had very bad bone infections, osteomyelitis. The one boy is 8 years old, and he is still underweight. We're still working on his nutrition, but he's already had 1 surgery. And a girl who's 10 years old, who's now, we have taken her to Malawi, which is the neighboring country north of us, to do surgery. She will need another few surgeries. He will need more surgery when he's older because he's already lost his one hip joint. So his one leg is already shorter than the other. So please pray for those two children, and of course, just for the resources that we will need for them as well going forward.
Yeah, so besides that, obviously there are many, many prayer requests. As Lynn said, we share those on our Facebook account, and that actually our Facebook feed, if you're not a Facebook person, which is fine, on our website under our blog, on our blog section, we also have the feed from Facebook there, so you don't have to be a Facebook user to follow the Facebook feed, and you can go there and just pray for things as they come up. We constantly need your prayer and support for courage and health and strength and wisdom to just keep doing what God's called us to do and not give up. But I think probably one of the biggest requests that we have right now is that we're looking for qualified people, called, qualified, dedicated people who are willing to invest their lives in missions, in serving God. And again, missions can be right there at home, but in serving God wherever He leads and calls you. But obviously we're looking for people who feel God leading them to this country of Mozambique and to serving. There's a number of posts. Lynn and I are at the point where we need to transition out. So over the next 3 years, we're praying that God would help us to continue to mentor a team and leadership here. So we're looking for people for that, as well as always looking for volunteers and others who can help us promote the mission and share the burden in North America, whether that's in the U.S. or Canada. And so, yeah, so you can pray with us for those things. Again, we're just really honored and privileged to be able to take this chance to share with you, even if it's somewhat informally. And we pray that you're encouraged. Thank you guys so much for your support. I should say, and I was going to say earlier, that City Church, Madison Gospel Tabernacle, as it was known way back when, supported my parents from the early 50s. So there's a long legacy, and then, of course, you guys have been involved with us since sort of the late 80s. So a lot of years of heritage and legacy and of investment in lives and in eternity. So thank you for your efforts and for your support. And yeah, just pray that this helps you get to know us a little bit better. Come and visit some point in time. Our doors are always open.
Yeah, thanks for being so engaged with us.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.